The new doorman arrived at the tall, shining building early in the morning. He wore a plain dark jacket and a cap pulled low. His face looked calm, his steps steady. No one paid much attention to him. For the people who worked in this place, a doorman was just another invisible worker. Someone who opened doors, someone who stood quietly, someone who did not matter. But this doorman was not an ordinary man. Behind the plain clothes, behind the quiet smile, he was Keanu Reeves, a famous actor known around the world. Still no one here knew. They only saw a man with kind eyes standing at the entrance, holding the door open for them. Each morning he greeted people with a polite nod. Some ignored him completely, some only gave him a half smile. Others spoke down to him as if he was beneath them. He never reacted, never argued. He simply did his job with patience. His calm energy made some of the lower staff feel at ease. They could sense something different about him, but they could not explain it. The office workers rushed in with fancy suits, expensive bags, and proud looks. They hardly noticed the doorman. They were always busy with phones, always in a hurry to reach the elevators. Keanu stood silently, observing. His sharp eyes noticed how the higher-ups behaved, how they treated the staff. He saw arrogance dripping from every gesture. He heard the careless words people spoke when they thought no one important was listening. At night, when the building became quiet, he stayed a little longer. He watched the cleaners mopping the marble floors, watched the security guards fighting sleep. He even helped carry boxes once when he saw a janitor struggling. The janitor looked surprised. No one ever helped them before, especially not a doorman, but Keanu simply smiled and said nothing. There was a mystery in his silence. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone watching closely, someone who wanted to see the truth. He was testing the people around him without them even knowing. Every rude remark, every arrogant laugh, every cruel order given to staff was like a piece of a puzzle he was putting together. Sometimes during lunch breaks, he sat outside the building alone. The drivers, janitors, and delivery men sat near him. They spoke about how hard their lives were, how badly they were treated. Keanu listened carefully, nodding at their words. He never spoke much, but the warmth in his eyes made them feel respected. They did not know who he really was, but they felt safe sharing their problems with him. Inside the building, rumors began to spread among the staff. Some said the new doorman was too polite, too kind to be normal. Others said his face looked familiar, but they could not place it. Still, no one thought of a Hollywood star. They just thought he was unusual for the job. One evening, as the sun went down, Keanu stood by the glass doors, the city lights reflected in the windows. People walked past him, not caring, he thought, about how strange life was. Here he was, one of the most recognizable men in the world, and yet not a single person in this building recognized him when he wore plain clothes. He was invisible, and in that invisibility he found freedom. He could see the real nature of people, not how they behaved in front of cameras or crowds, but how they treated those they thought were beneath them. That was the reason he was here. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. He wanted to test the soul of the company. The nights grew colder, but he stayed at his post with quiet patience. He opened doors for everyone with the same respect, whether it was the CEO in his luxury car or the cleaner with tired eyes. He bowed slightly to each one. His humility confused the arrogant. They could not understand why a man in such a low position looked so peaceful. The building staff began to whisper stories about him. They said he was not like the other doormen. He never complained, never demanded anything. He even gave his lunch once to a hungry delivery boy who had no money. These small acts of kindness started to build a quiet respect among the lower workers. For the first time they felt seen, but the executives did not notice. To them he was still just a doorman. They walked past with arrogance, bragging about their wealth, mocking their own staff. They did not know that every word, every action was being silently recorded in his mind. Keanu stood there, steady as a stone, his eyes calm, his heart patient. The story of this building was unfolding in front of him, and he was waiting for the right moment to reveal who he truly was. For now he was only the quiet doorman, invisible to those blinded by pride. But soon, his presence would shake the entire company. The next morning, the building was alive with noise and movement. Expensive cars stopped in front, drivers rushed to open doors, and men and women in sharp suits hurried through the glass entrance. Their faces carried pride, their voices carried arrogance. The new doorman stood at his place, calm as always, holding the door open with the same respect for each person, but very few even looked at him. Inside this company, the culture was cold and cruel. The higher you were in rank, the less you cared about the people below. Executives walked like kings. They looked at cleaners as if they were dirt. They shouted at assistants for small mistakes. They laughed loudly at their own jokes while ignoring anyone who was not useful to them. The doorman watched it all quietly. His eyes followed their actions. His mind stored every word. One executive, tall and proud, stepped out of his luxury car and walked past the doorman. He did not say thank you when the door was held open. Instead, he muttered that the glass was not polished enough and blamed the janitors. Another woman in a shining dress and expensive heels scolded the receptionist in front of everyone because the coffee was not hot enough. The receptionist lowered her head in shame while the woman strutted away. The doorman noticed how her voice dripped with poison. It was not just one or two people. It was the whole group of top officials. They treated everyone beneath them like tools. The janitors, the delivery boys, the cleaners, and even the young interns felt crushed under their arrogance. No one dared to speak. Fear was stronger than fairness in this place. The doorman felt the weight of that silence, but he did not break it yet. During lunch hours, when the executives gathered in their private dining area, their laughter filled the floor. They mocked the drivers, calling them slow and uneducated. They mocked the waitresses who served them, saying they were clumsy and unworthy. The words cut like knives, but the executives thought it was funny. Outside the glass doors of the dining area, workers carried trays with heavy arms and tired faces, pretending not to hear. But they heard everything, and so did the doorman standing nearby. One afternoon, a young janitor accidentally spilled water in the lobby. An executive passing by stopped and shouted so loudly that the whole hall went silent. He called the boy useless, lazy, and threatened to have him fired. The janitor trembled. His eyes filled with tears. The other workers looked away, afraid to interfere. The doorman, however, saw it all. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained calm and silent. Another day, an intern was carrying files too heavy for her small hands. She dropped them near the elevator. The executives inside laughed instead of helping. One man even kicked the files aside with his shoe so the elevator doors would not close. The girl bent down quickly to gather them, her face red with embarrassment. The doorman bent down to help her pick them up. He gave her a kind look. She whispered a soft, "Thank you," before hurrying away. Her cheeks burned from shame, but in her heart she felt grateful for the kindness. The staff began to notice how different the doorman was compared to the executives. He never shouted, never insulted anyone, never ignored anyone. His silence was not cold, it was warm. The executives, however, were the opposite. Their silence toward the workers was filled with contempt. Every word they spoke was heavy with superiority. Still, no one recognized him. To the arrogant men and women, he was invisible. They never imagined that the man holding the door was actually Keanu Reeves, a man richer and more famous than all of them combined. Their pride blinded them. They only saw what they wanted to see, and in their eyes, a doorman was nothing. The more the doorman watched, the clearer the truth became. This company was rotten from the top. The leaders were not only arrogant, but also cruel. They had no kindness in their hearts. They were building their success on the pain of others. He saw waitresses mocked, cleaners shouted at, receptionists humiliated, security guards treated like fools. Every day was another page of a cruel book being written, and Keanu was reading each page silently, but he also noticed the quiet strength of the workers. Even after insults, they kept working. Even after humiliation, they carried on. Their dignity lived in their patience, and their silent courage touched him deeply. He respected them more than the arrogant men who thought they ruled the building. As night fell and the last executives left, the building grew quiet. The staff finally breathed in peace. The doorman stayed by the glass doors, watching the cleaners polish the floor, watching the guards talk softly to each other. He felt the contrast so clearly. The workers had humanity in their eyes, while the executives only had greed. The doorman knew this was only the beginning. He had seen enough to understand the arrogance ruling inside the walls, but he also knew more was hidden. The deeper he stayed, the more truth he would uncover. The executives had no idea that the quiet man they insulted daily was about to change their world forever. For now, he remained still, letting them dig their own grave with every arrogant word and cruel laugh. Late in the evening, after most of the executives had left the building, the doorman stayed at his post as usual. The lobby was quiet, the bright lights reflecting off the polished floor. A cleaner entered, her small cart squeaking as she pushed it forward. She carried heavy trash, bags on her shoulders, her thin arms trembling from the weight. The bags almost tore open, spilling papers onto the floor. She sighed deeply but kept working, knowing no one would come to help her. The doorman watched silently. He could see the strain in her face, the way her back bent under the load. She looked tired, maybe too tired to even finish her shift. For a moment he stood still, his hand on the door. Then he stepped forward, his calm voice breaking the silence. "Let me help you," he said softly. The cleaner froze, confused. No one in this building ever offered to help, especially not a doorman. He lifted the heavy bags. With ease, his strong arms carried them as if they were nothing. The woman blinked in surprise. Her mouth slightly open, she whispered, "Thank you," but her voice shook as if she was not used to gratitude. He only smiled, nodded, and placed the bags neatly onto her cart. She wanted to ask why he would do such a thing, but the warmth in his eyes stopped her words. For the first time that night, she felt seen. From that day on, the workers began to notice small things. When the janitor struggled with his mop bucket, the doorman held the elevator door for him. When a delivery boy arrived, late, sweating and scared, the doorman calmed him down and gave him a bottle of water from his own lunch bag. When a waitress dropped a tray, the doorman knelt to help her pick up the pieces instead of letting her suffer alone. None of these acts were loud. None were grand. They were simple gestures of kindness, but in a place where kindness was rare, they felt like miracles. The staff started whispering among themselves. "The new doorman is different," they said. "He treats us like equals. He respects us." Some even wondered if he was an angel in disguise. His calmness carried something unusual, something they could not explain. Still, they never guessed the truth. They never imagined that this humble man was one of the most famous actors in the world. One night, when the building was almost empty, a young cleaner approached him shyly. She said, "Sir, why do you help us? No one here ever cares." The doorman looked at her for a moment. His voice was low and gentle. "Because you deserve respect," he said. "Everyone does." Then he returned to his quiet post. The cleaner walked away with tears in her eyes. That single sentence gave her more strength than 100 speeches. The executives, however, remained blind. They never noticed the doorman's kindness, or perhaps they did not care. To them, staff were invisible, shadows to be ordered around. They never realized that their cruel actions were being silently balanced by the doorman's gentle ones. The difference between arrogance and kindness grew sharper each day. As weeks passed, the lower workers began to trust him. Some sat with him during their breaks, telling him their stories. A guard confessed how his son was sick, but he could not afford treatment. A waitress shared how she was working 2 jobs to support her family. A delivery boy admitted he skipped meals so his younger siblings could eat. The doorman listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. His silence was full of care. His nods and small smiles told them he truly heard their pain. One evening, the same cleaner he had helped with the trash bags brought him a cup of tea. It was a simple paper cup, steaming hot. She placed it near him and said, "You always help us. Let me help you for once." He accepted it with gratitude, sipping slowly. That tea tasted richer to him than any expensive wine, because it carried genuine kindness. Soon, even the shyest workers began greeting him warmly. They said good night when they left. They said good morning when they arrived. They felt safe around him. Some even joked softly with him, Their small smiles returned in a place where laughter was usually crushed. It was as if his quiet kindness had planted seeds in their hearts. But still the bigger world inside the building remained the same. The executives continued with their cruelty. The arrogance did not stop. In fact, it grew louder. They mocked, shouted, and humiliated as before. Yet without knowing it, their cruelty was making his kindness shine even brighter. The workers began to see a silent difference between the two worlds. The world of greed and arrogance and the world of compassion and respect. The doorman never asked for anything in return. He simply continued helping whenever he could. To him, these acts were natural. He did not see them as favors. He saw them as what should have been normal human behavior. But in a place where kindness was rare, his actions began to look extraordinary. Late one night, as he locked the doors, he looked around the empty lobby. The cleaners were finishing their work. The guards were yawning. The city outside was glowing with lights. He thought about how strange it was. All his life, people had praised him for movies and fame. Yet here, disguised as a doorman, he found the real meaning of respect. It was not in wealth or power, it was in small moments of kindness that touched tired hearts. He knew then that his mission was only beginning. The company's true test had yet to come. But for now, his silent kindness was changing lives one gesture at a time. One rainy evening, the building lobby was almost empty. The workers were finishing their duties. The doorman stood near the glass doors, his jacket slightly wet from opening the door again and again for late visitors. A young employee, no older than 20, kept staring at him from a distance. She was an intern, nervous and shy, but she had sharp eyes. Something about the doorman seemed strange to her. He was too calm, too graceful, too different from any worker she had seen before. She remembered seeing his face somewhere. She thought and thought. At first she brushed it away, telling herself she was imagining things. But the thought kept coming back. One night, when the rain poured hard outside and only a few people remained in the building, she gathered courage and walked toward him. "Excuse me," she whispered, staring at him carefully. "Do I know you from somewhere?" The doorman gave his usual gentle smile. He did not answer right away. The girl's heart raced. She could feel something unusual about this man. Suddenly, she remembered a movie she had watched with her family. She gasped softly. "You look like Keanu Reeves," she whispered, almost too scared to say it out loud. The doorman's eyes softened. He leaned a little closer so no one else could hear. His voice was low but kind. "That's because I am," he said. The intern froze. Her mouth fell open. She could not believe her ears. Her legs felt weak. She almost dropped the papers she was holding. He quickly gestured for her to stay calm. "Please," he said gently, "don't tell anyone. I need to stay hidden for now." The girl looked around nervously, making sure no one else was near. "But why?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Why are you here as a doorman?" Keanu's eyes grew serious. He looked at the shiny floor, at the tall glass walls, then back at her. "I want to see how this company treats the people who have no power," he said. "I want to know the truth, not what they show in the news, not what they say in their reports, but the real truth of how they treat their workers." The intern listened, her chest tight with shock. He explained further. "I am here in disguise. I am here to watch, to learn, to test their hearts." He paused. "Then, when the time is right, I will reveal what I have seen." The girl covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. She had never told anyone, but she had suffered in this company too. Executives had shouted at her for small mistakes. They treated her as if she was worthless. Now she realized she was not alone. She whispered, "They are cruel. They laugh at us. They call us names. They don't care if we cry." Keanu nodded slowly, his face calm, but his eyes burning with quiet fire. "I know," he said. "I've seen it every day I watch them, and every day they show me who they truly are." The intern wiped her eyes quickly. She looked at him with new respect. "You're not just here as a doorman," she said softly. "You're here as a mirror to their souls." He gave a faint smile at her words. He said, "Exactly." From that moment, the girl promised herself she would protect his secret. She did not tell anyone, not even her closest friend in the office. She carried the heavy knowledge quietly. It gave her strength whenever she felt crushed by cruel words, she reminded herself. The doorman knows. He sees. He understands. And he will not let this last forever, over the next few weeks. The bond between them grew silently. She greeted him warmly each morning. He always responded with the same gentle nod. Sometimes she brought him tea when she returned from her break. Sometimes he asked softly how her day had been. Their conversations were short, hidden in whispers, but each one built trust. Keanu continued his role as if nothing had changed. To the executives, he was still invisible. They mocked, they shouted, they laughed at the suffering of others. They had no idea that one of the world's most famous actors was standing only a few feet away, studying their cruelty. One afternoon, the intern walked past a group of executives who were mocking a cleaner. Her fists clenched, but she stayed silent. When she passed by the doorman, she glanced at him. His expression did not change, but his eyes told her he had seen it too. That silent understanding gave her comfort. She no longer felt alone in the storm. She began to notice how much he observed. Every cruel remark, every arrogant action he stored in his memory. Sometimes she wondered if he wrote things down after hours. He was too precise, too calm, like a man with a plan. Late one night, she asked him, "What will you do with all of this?" His answer was steady. "I will reveal it when they least expect it. They believe they are untouchable, but no one is untouchable when the truth comes out." Her eyes widened. She whispered, "You're going to expose them." He nodded slightly. "The time will come." From that night, she carried hope in her heart. She knew something powerful was coming. The workers around her continued to suffer, but she looked at the doorman differently. To them, he was just a quiet man holding doors. To her, he was a hidden storm, waiting for the right moment to strike. The rain outside stopped, but inside the company, the cruelty continued. No one knew that the man they ignored daily was gathering truth like fire, ready to burn away their arrogance. Only one young intern knew his secret, and she held on to it like a precious treasure, because she understood one day soon, the humble doorman would turn into the voice of justice, and the whole company would never be the same again. The night of the grand corporate event arrived. The building was decorated with bright lights, golden ribbons, and tall flowers standing in glass vases. Expensive cars lined up outside, engines humming as drivers opened doors for executives and their wealthy guests inside the lobby. Music played softly. Waiters carried trays of sparkling drinks, and the air smelled of perfume and pride. The doorman stood quietly at his post, his eyes calm as always, holding the door open for the people, who brushed past without even looking at him. It was a night of celebration for the company. The executives had invited investors, partners, and politicians. They wanted to show off their wealth and power. Their laughter filled the air as they strutted through the lobby, greeting each other. With loud voices, they were proud of their empire, but they did not notice the watchful eyes of the man in the simple uniform by the door. The lower workers were running everywhere. Waitresses hurried with trays that felt heavier than usual. Janitors polished the floors until their backs ached. Security guards stood at every corner, their faces stiff. For the workers, this night was not a celebration but a burden. They had to serve and smile while being treated like shadows. The doorman could see the exhaustion in their faces. He felt his chest tighten with quiet anger. The event began in the grand hall. Glass chandeliers glowed above. Long tables were filled with food, and the stage was prepared for speeches. The executives raised their glasses high, boasting about profits, growth, and success. They praised themselves in every sentence, but not once did they mention the people who worked day and night to keep the company alive. The doorman stood near the entrance listening silently. He noticed the pride in their voices, the arrogance in their words. Then it happened. A young waitress, carrying a tray of glasses, stumbled slightly when an executive brushed past her too roughly. A single glass tipped and fell, shattering loudly on the polished floor. The music stopped for a moment. All eyes turned to the girl. Her face burned red with shame. She bent quickly to clean up the pieces, whispering apologies, but instead of helping her, one of the executives sneered. He laughed loudly, pointing at her as if she was an object of entertainment. "Look at this clumsy girl," he shouted. "Can't even carry a tray." Another executive joined in, mocking her in front of the guests. The girl's hands shook as she tried to gather the shards. A sharp piece cut her finger, and blood stained the napkin she held. But no one cared. The laughter grew louder. Some guests joined in, amused by her suffering. The doorman's hands clenched at his sides. His face remained calm, but inside, fire burned. He watched as the waitress's eyes filled with tears. He saw her humiliation, the cruelty of the men who called themselves leaders. His silence was heavier now. His eyes locked on the executives who thought this was funny. The intern who knew his secret stood near the corner. Her heart pounded as she looked at him. She could see his jaw tighten. She could see the storm in his expression even though his body stood still. She whispered to herself, "Not yet. Not yet." Because she knew he was waiting for the right moment to strike. The waitress left the hall quietly, her head bowed, her pain carried like a shadow. The executives returned to their boasting as if nothing had happened. They raised their glasses again, toasting their victories. But the atmosphere among the workers had changed. The janitors, the cleaners, the waitresses, they all felt the sting of that moment. They all saw the cruelty for what it was. And they also noticed the silent gaze of the doorman watching everything. The night dragged on. More speeches followed, filled with arrogance and lies. The executives bragged about charity donations that were never truly given. They spoke of caring for employees while ignoring the suffering right outside the hall. Their words were empty, their smiles hollow. The doorman listened, each word becoming another piece of evidence in his heart. He knew the breaking point was near. Late into the night, when the music slowed and the guests grew tired, another scene unfolded. A cleaner accidentally walked through the wrong door into the event hall, carrying her mop and bucket. The executives shouted angrily, ordering her out as if she had committed a crime. The woman lowered her eyes, her face pale. She whispered an apology and hurried away. The laughter that followed her departure was cruel and sharp. The doorman's eyes darkened. His patience was tested to its limit. The intern glanced at him again. She could feel the tension. She thought he might reveal himself right there, but he stayed still, breathing slowly. His moment had not yet come. But inside, he knew the time was close. The arrogance was too much, the cruelty too deep. He could no longer let it continue. As the last guests left, the doorman stood silently by the door, his posture straight, his eyes unblinking. The executives walked past him, laughing loudly, bragging about how successful the night had been. To them, the event was proof of their greatness. To him, it was proof of their corruption. He opened the door politely for each one, but in his heart he whispered, "Your time is ending." The workers who had suffered that night exchanged quiet looks. They did not know who the doorman truly was, but they felt his silent promise. Something about his presence gave them hope. They could sense he was not like the others. They did not know why, but they trusted that one day justice would come through him, and so the night ended. But the memory of the humiliation remained. For the workers, it was another wound. For the executives, it was just another laugh. For the doorman, it was the breaking point. He knew the next time they tried to crush someone with their arrogance, he would not remain silent. His moment of truth was coming, and when it arrived, the whole company would tremble. The day after the grand event, the building felt heavier than usual. The staff moved with tired steps. The cleaners looked worn out, and the waitresses still carried the sting of humiliation from the night before. The executives, however, entered proudly, their voices loud as they laughed about how successful the party had been. They bragged about their speeches, about the guests who praised them. None of them spoke about the waitress they mocked or the cleaner they insulted. For them, those moments did not matter. The doorman stood at his post as calm as ever, but inside him something had shifted. He had waited patiently. He had observed quietly. But the cruelty had crossed the line. The time of silence was ending. He knew he could not stay hidden much. Longer still, he kept his uniform neat, his face calm and his posture humble, waiting for the right moment to act. That moment came faster than he expected. In the afternoon, a senior executive stormed through the lobby, shouting into his phone. His face was red with anger. Behind him, a young assistant carried a stack of files. Struggling to keep up, she stumbled once and the papers slipped from her hands. The sound of papers scattering filled the lobby. The executive spun around, his face twisted with rage. "Useless," he shouted. "You can't even carry documents. Do you know how much money you just wasted in my time?" The assistant's eyes filled with tears. She bent quickly to gather the papers. Her hands shook as she tried to collect them. The lobby grew quiet as workers watched, afraid but unable to look away. The executive raised his voice again, his insults growing sharper. He called her names that cut deep. He pointed at her like she was trash. The assistant trembled, her tears falling onto the pages. At that moment, the doorman stepped forward. For weeks he had stood silently, but now his voice broke through the cruelty. "That's enough," he said, firmly. The words rang across the lobby. Everyone froze. The assistant stopped crying. The workers lifted their heads. The executive turned in shock. "Who do you think you are?" the man barked. "You're just a doorman. Stay in your place." But the doorman did not move back. He straightened his shoulders. His calm eyes locked onto the executive's face. His voice was steady but strong. "Respect costs nothing," he said, "yet you spend it as if it has no value." The lobby was silent. The workers held their breath. They had never heard anyone speak to an executive like this. The executive laughed harshly. "Do you know who you're talking to? I could have you fired this second." The doorman's lips curved into a faint smile, and slowly he reached up. He removed his cap. His hair fell back. His face, once hidden by plain clothes, now shone clear under the lobby lights. Gasps filled the air. Murmurs spread quickly. The staff's eyes widened. The intern near the desk covered her mouth. For the first time, the executive saw who had been standing at their door all this time. Keanu Reeves. The lobby erupted with shock. Some workers whispered his name. Some froze in disbelief. Even the security guard stepped forward, unsure what to do. The arrogant executive stumbled back a step, his face pale. His anger melted into fear. You're Keanu Reeves," he stammered. The doorman, no longer just a doorman, nodded calmly. "Yes," he said, "and I have seen everything." The workers' eyes glowed with sudden hope. They had suffered in silence for years, and now they realized the man who had helped them, listened to them, and respected them was not just a kind stranger but a powerful voice the world would hear. The executives, however, looked terrified. They whispered to each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. The arrogant executive tried to recover his pride. He forced a laugh. He said loudly, "This is a joke, isn't it? What are you doing here pretending to be one of us?" But Keanu's calm eyes silenced him. "I came here to see the truth," Keanu said, "and I saw it clearly. I saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the way you treat people as less than human. I saw you humiliate those who work harder than you ever will." His voice was steady, every word sharp like a blade. The assistant, who had been crying, looked up at him with wide eyes. Her tears still clung to her cheeks, but in her heart she felt a strange warmth. Someone had finally stood for her. Someone had finally said what no one else dared to say. The staff around her felt the same. Their hearts pounded with hope. For the first time, they believed justice might come. The executive sputtered, his face red. He shouted, "You can't come here and judge us. You know nothing about this company." Keanu stepped closer, his presence towering without force. His voice lowered but carried through the hall. "I know enough. I know the worth of kindness. I know the weight of cruelty. And I know which one builds and which one destroys." The workers felt chills. They looked at each other, their eyes shining with silent excitement. The man they had thought was just a quiet doorman had revealed himself as someone who could not be ignored. The arrogance of the executives cracked for the first time. They were no longer mocking, no longer laughing. Their pride was trembling. Keanu looked around the lobby. His gaze moved from the trembling assistant to the cleaners, the guards, the receptionists. He said softly but firmly, This company has built walls of arrogance, but those walls are thin. They will fall. The words echoed. The staff stood straighter. The executives paled further. The truth had begun to rise. That evening marked the turning point. The mask had been lifted. The humble doorman was gone, and in his place stood a man the whole world respected. The executives could not laugh anymore. They could not hide behind their pride. For the first time, the workers felt the power shift. The silent storm had spoken, and the company would never be the same again. The day after the reveal, the entire building buzzed with whispers. Workers could not stop talking about the moment the quiet doorman removed his cap and showed his true face. Some still could not believe it. They kept asking each other if it was real, but the truth was clear. The man who had held doors and carried trash bags was Keanu Reeves. The executives, however, were shaken. Their confidence cracked like glass. They walked with stiff backs and pale faces. Their laughter was gone, their arrogance hidden under fear. Keanu arrived at the lobby as usual, but this time everyone looked at him differently. The workers greeted him with respect and warmth. The executives avoided his eyes. Some even tried to smile nervously, pretending they had always been kind. But he remembered every word, every insult, every cruel laugh. He had not forgotten. In the afternoon, a meeting was called in the grand hall. All executives were present, their voices low. They thought they could control the situation. They whispered about reputation, about damage control. They believed they still held the power. But when Keanu walked into the hall, silence fell. Every worker standing by the walls turned their eyes to him. For the first time, the balance of the building had changed. Keanu stood at the center, his voice calm but strong. "I did not come here for fame or for attention," he said. "I came to see the truth, and I have seen it clearly." He looked directly at the executives. "You built this company with pride but filled it with cruelty. You treat people like tools, not human beings. You humiliate, you mock, you destroy dignity, and you call it success." The workers nodded softly, their hearts beating fast. No one had ever dared to speak this way inside the hall, but Keanu did not stop. He reached into a small bag he carried. He pulled out papers, photographs, and recordings. For weeks he had been documenting everything. He had taken notes, gathered testimonies from staff, and even recorded the arrogant words of the executives during events. Now he laid it all out. Voices filled the room as the evidence was shown. Recordings played of executives mocking staff, laughing about exploiting workers. Photographs displayed waitresses humiliated, janitors insulted, assistants crying under cruel treatment. The hall grew heavier with each piece of truth. The executives shifted uncomfortably, sweat on their foreheads. Their carefully built image was breaking apart in front of their own employees. One of them stood up angrily, shouting, "This is not real, these are lies." But Keanu's calm gaze silenced him. The workers spoke up one by one, their voices shaking but filled with courage. "It's true," a cleaner said. "You called us garbage." Another spoke. "You mocked me when I spilled coffee." A driver added. "You laughed when my child was sick." More voices rose, breaking years of silence. The hall echoed with truth. The executives tried to control the chaos. They shouted back, ordering the workers to be quiet. But no one listened anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by strength. They looked at Keanu standing tall among them, and they found their courage in his presence. Keanu raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. He spoke with calm authority. "This company is not only corrupt, it is broken from the inside. The world deserves to know. The workers deserve justice, and the cruelty must end." He turned to the staff. "You are not invisible. You are not worthless. You are the ones who hold this place together. Without you, these walls would collapse." His words brought tears to many eyes. The executives realized the danger. If this truth reached the public, their empire would fall. They begged. They tried to reason with him. "We can fix this quietly," one of them said. "There is no need to take it outside." But Keanu shook his head. "Justice cannot be quiet," he answered. "It must be seen. It must be heard." The intern who knew his secret from the beginning stood near the corner. Her eyes shone with pride. She had waited for this moment, and now it was here. The quiet man who once whispered kindness had become the voice of truth in front of everyone. The workers began to cheer softly, not with loud celebration, but with steady hope. They stood straighter. They looked at each other with courage. The executives panicked, but their voices no longer carried power. The evidence was too strong, the truth too heavy to deny. Keanu spoke one final sentence that cut through the hall like lightning. A company that builds its empire on cruelty will always collapse, and today, your collapse begins. The silence after his words was deep. The workers felt their hearts racing. The executives sat frozen, their faces pale as stone. When Keanu left the hall, the staff followed him with their eyes. He walked calmly, not with arrogance, but with the quiet strength of a man who had fulfilled his purpose. He had exposed the truth. He had broken the walls of fear. The building would never be the same. Again, the storm had arrived, and it carried justice in its winds.